of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all.
So a deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great and wonderful land of ours. I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face and how it affects every aspect of our lives, from our relationships to our workplace environments, to our communities, and to our national integrity. The character crisis affects every aspect of our lives. That's why character does indeed matter, and that's why the title of this program. And as you know, this program opens and closes with the theme of a patriotic flavor, because our founders knew that for freedom to endure, we had to have people with sound moral compasses living in the country. You cannot have freedom without character. They are totally interdependent. They are inextricably connected to one another. The founders knew this, and they knew that if you gave people of sound moral character, if you gave folks like that maximum freedom from government oppression, from regulation of any kind, that these folks would create opportunities for themselves, and they would also create opportunities for others, and they would thrive and prosper. But in our character-disturbed age, unfortunately, because people are so dysfunctional, there is the constant urge to regulate a solution to the problem, and that always means restricting freedom. And our freedoms are limited perhaps now more than they've ever been, and it's only going to get worse until we face this issue right on target. So toward that end, I've written some books, which I urge you to get a hold of if you haven't already. In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, the international bestseller on how to deal with those folks who make you feel pretty crazy, try to get the better of you and look good doing it. Then my other book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, which is the in-depth study of all the disturbed characters out there, all the problem folks you're likely to encounter in your life. And then my book for the Christian faith community, The Judas Syndrome, where I talk about how genuine faith can indeed save a person from their baser selves. And a book coming out in just a couple of months, How Did We End Up Here? A book co-written with me and Catherine Armistead, and that should be out toward the end of April. It'll be available on Amazon.com through CreateSpace, and it will also be available in digital format. I'll have more to say about that as time goes on and as the launch date approaches. But how did we end up here is meant for those folks who are scratching their heads and wondering not only how they ended up where they have ended up in a problem relationship, but also how we have ended up here as a society. So, welcome once again to Character Matters. If you want to join the conversation, if you have a story you want to share, a question you want to ask, something you saw on the blog at manipulative-people.com, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'm happy to take your call. I know this is Super Bowl Sunday. I've got my DVR set. The game is in progress right now. And I know that a lot of folks are glued to their sets, but not everyone. And if you just happen to be one of those folks tuned in and you have a question you want to ask me about a situation that you're dealing with, or perhaps you just want to share a story about dealing with a disturbed character in your life, maybe you want to share some thoughts about the phenomenon of our time and what is behind it, what is causing the character crisis that we face, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Well, I'm going to be doing another series of workshops next week. I'll be in Columbus, Ohio on Wednesday. Then I'll be in Cincinnati, Ohio on that Thursday of next week. And then I'll be in Indianapolis on Friday. And these workshops are for professionals. Anyone may attend. Just be warned that professionals pay a hefty fee for continuing education credits. So these are not public workshops that are tailored for a mass audience at a relatively lower per person fee. But anyone is welcome. And if you are a mental health professional, if you're somebody who deals with problem characters in any respect, if you're a probation officer, a parole officer, if you're someone who works in community government, you might want to attend, and I'm happy to have you attend the workshops. We'll be talking about all kinds of bad actors, all kinds of manipulative characters, and I'll be having some books to vend also. You can find information out about these workshops on my blog, where you can also find timely articles on manipulative characters and other problem characters at www.manipulative-people.com. That's www.manipulative-people.com. This is one of the more popular blogs in the country, and you can also reach me directly through the blog on the Contact Dr. Simon page. You can shoot me an email, and I will respond. I do promise. I've once again, because I've been battling a sinus infection and doing so much traveling, I'm once again very remiss in replying. I'm weeks behind once again in my emails. That happens periodically. I apologize for that. I do answer all my emails eventually. I do get back with folks who write me. It just takes me a while sometimes, and right now I'm sad to say that I'm as much as 3 weeks behind. So I apologize for that, but it will get better, I promise, and I will get back with you. But you can reach me by going to the manipulative-people.com blog and going to the Contact Dr. Simon page and clicking on the button there and sending me an email. You'll also find on the blog a series of articles that I've been doing on narcissism, and especially what happens when a narcissist who has this grandiose opinion of themselves, when narcissists' world comes tumbling down, when reality crashes in, when it becomes apparent and undeniable to them that they're not quite as great as they thought they were, and then there is some hell to pay. And so I've got an article just posted this past Friday that exemplifies that. It talks about a particular case in which someone who had basically succeeded in alienating his entire family just kind of went ballistic, pointing the finger everywhere else but where it needed to be pointed. And only after he had lost almost everything, and only after years of some hard lessons and some gained wisdom and maturity from experience, did this person come to see that it was his own narcissistic character that was at the root of so many of his problems. This does happen from time to time. You know, people are maturing much later, generally, and I do find that folks who are very difficult to work with, almost impossible to work with, and who have virtually no insight into their problems, they sometimes start coming around in midlife. You know, they say 50 is the new 40 and 60 is the new 50. There's a lot of truth to that. I know folks who are just really starting to get a clue about things in their 60s. I've counseled more folks, more people in late middle to early retirement age, late middle life to early retirement age, on issues related to character growth and development, where they're basically finally kind of getting a clue about what's the best way to approach life, what's the best way to deal with situations in life. They've come to appreciate aspects of their character that have caused them so many problems. Maybe they've had as many as 2 or 3 failed marriages. Maybe they have wrecked a couple of careers. Maybe they have struggled with addictions of one type or another. And they've just finally come to the conclusion that there was something about the way that they were doing things, something about who they had defined themselves as a person that was just not functional and needed to change. And this is happening later and later in life, but it does happen. So there is hope, but as I point out in my books and as I point out in my articles online, one of the things that we know is that when you go looking for help, either if you're in a relationship with a character disturbed person, or if you yourself know you have some character issues and you go looking for help, you're likely not to find the right kind of help because there are very few folks, very few professionals skilled in the specialized art of dealing with character disturbance. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I have written my books and why I post my articles online. In addition to manipulative-people.com, you can also go to another great website called Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life. I have an article a week on that site as well, and its URL is www.counselingresource.com. That's counseling with 2 L's resource.com. You'll find some articles on that site as well that I've written. And I encourage you to really, if you haven't done so, to read the reviews and to consider digesting at least one of my 3 books. And you'll have your eyes opened, I think, to a different perspective. I have so many people call or write me or send me an email telling me that just seeing things a different way, just seeing the perspective that I advance in my books, about this phenomenon of our age and what's responsible for it and what we need to do to deal with it. I have so many folks tell me that alone was a big help in turning their lives around when they were dealing with someone of impaired character, whether it was a manipulator or a narcissist or one of the aggressive personalities that I describe in my books. Getting that perspective straight was a big help. So I'm very glad of that. It's not one of the number one reasons why I wrote the books the way I did write them, because I wanted that new perspective to be very understandable, and I knew that once folks had their feelings validated, that they would appreciate the perspective. And so I can't urge you enough. If you haven't done so already, I know many of you in the listening audience have, but if you haven't done so, I urge you. It's well worth your time. The books are not expensive. As a matter of fact, the e-books are very easy to come by. There's an audio book, too, for In Sheep's Clothing. And I don't mention that very often. I just realized that. I don't mention the fact that In Sheep's Clothing has an audio version. A lot of people find that very helpful because you can listen to it as you're riding in your car or as you're jogging. You can download it on MP3 format and listen to it on your smartphone or other device, and that makes it quite convenient. So avail yourself of the books In Sheep's Clothing, Character Disturbance, or if you're a member of the Christian faith community and you want a really great perspective on the problems of our day, the Judas Syndrome. And look for How Did We End Up Here, coming out in just the next couple of months. Well, folks, I know that it's Super Bowl Sunday. I know a lot of you are distracted by other things. But if you want to join the conversation, as I said, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. If you have a story you want to share, if you want to pick my brain on something, ask me a question. I'm happy to take your call. If you just want to give your own opinion about the phenomenon of our time and what's behind it and what we need to do about it, I'm happy to hear that too. So just give us a call at 718-717-8296. Well, I've got this article posted this past Friday about a situation where a person, as I mentioned before, managed to alienate his entire family because of his grandiosity. And I've explained this before in a couple of past programs, but I'll do it again. Folks with the grandiose narcissistic personality type, not the folks who pretentiously act all that, but the folks who truly believe that they're all that. They know they're great. You can see some of them, you can see one of them in particular, among the field of presidential candidates right now. These folks have a particularly different character. You know, in the old days, we used to believe, and it was promoted for a long time very strongly in all the self-help books, this notion that underneath it all, narcissistic individuals are wounded, damaged ego individuals who are really insecure and are suffering from deficient self-esteem. And therefore, what they do unconsciously, and that's the key to these old theories, that unconsciously they construct a facade whereby they project an image of confidence, they project an image of haughtiness, but it's phony. And it's nothing but a compensation for their inner feelings of insecurity and for their really lack of self-esteem. And we held this notion to be universally true for the long time, and we promoted this notion, and the general public got to believing this stuff and buying it lock, stock, and barrel. Well, when I first started doing research, clinical case study research for my first book, In Sheep's Clothing, and started taking vigorous notes on the case files that I was examining from my practice, which was a very diverse practice, not just individual private practice in my office, seeing patients for therapy, but also supervising evaluations at institutions, doing evaluations at institutions, providing therapy services at various institutions of all kinds, including adolescent treatment centers, psychiatric centers. I came to the conclusion that there were two types of narcissists. And I came to that conclusion based on the fact that when I went looking for underlying feelings of insecurity, damaged self-esteem, et cetera, parents who didn't afford proper recognition, folks who had been traumatized by bullying, blah, 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 blah. Well, many times I didn't find it. So I came to the conclusion that there really were two different kinds of narcissists, and I divided them into the camp that I call the more neurotic narcissist, who indeed was struggling with some insecurity and low self-esteem, et cetera, and really didn't have a clue what they were doing because they were unconsciously putting forth an image that was turning people off, but it was just a mask. And then I decided that in contrast to that was a more what I called character disturbed or character disordered narcissist who was not phony. These folks really thought they were quite special. They had generally lived a life of privilege, or they knew that they had a lot going for them in the way of looks, brains, talent, whatnot, maybe even a track record of some achievement. And they tend to take 100% credit for everything, even for their natural gifts. Excuse me. I apologize. I have this sinus infection that is just driving me a little crazy, and I didn't want to cough on the air. So I muted the microphone so I could get rid of a little bit of this. At any rate, what I was talking about is that these more character-disturbed narcissists really are legends in their own mind, as they've been called by other clinicians. They really do believe in their own greatness. And they claim credit for all their positive attributes, even the ones given to them by nature itself. You know, Mother Nature confers on us all different gifts. And whether we want to see them as pure accidents of nature or whether we want to see them as gifts from God, the fact is, some of these things we have nothing absolutely to do with. We have absolutely nothing to do with how much intelligence we're granted. We have nothing whatsoever to do with how we're constituted physically. You know, some folks, you know, they're just not endowed, basically, with those physiques that make us all envious. Other folks do not have musical talent or other kinds of talent. Some folks do. And these gifts are given. They are not created by the individual. The individual is not responsible for them. But what I found is that ultra-confident people, the grandiose narcissists that I talk about. Um, they truly claimed credit for all these accidental things. They claim credit for all these accidental gifts of nature or these gifts of God. In short, they don't know how to give credit where credit is due. And it inflates their sense of who they are. I recognized this early on. And then I started to write about it. Well, at the time, there was absolutely no empirical scientific support for these notions. I knew what I was seeing. I had done my own clinical case study research. But there were no published scientific findings supporting what I was saying. So I was kind of out on a limb. And some of my colleagues didn't really, they didn't really cotton to some of the things that I was saying. Well, over the last 20 or so years, especially the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of empirical evidence has been pouring in that indeed many of the things that I thought contributed to this grandiosity that was not phony, but was genuine, through to the bone, disgustingly haughty kind of narcissism, was actually due to many of these factors. As a matter of fact, there's a researcher by the name of Brummelman who's done studies on the effect of certain kinds of praise. And when you recognize individuals for their natural endowments, you inflate their egos, and it has a negative effect on their genuine self-esteem. So it turns out that these notions were valid, and even though I differentiated between what I call the neurotic versus the grandiose narcissist, the literature now, the professional literature, is distinguishing between what we call the vulnerable versus the grandiose narcissist. And the descriptions of these folks are almost completely analogous to the distinction that I have always made between the neurotic and character disturbed or character disordered narcissist. So what the researchers and other writers are calling the vulnerable type of narcissist is very much along the lines of the neurotic narcissist in my terminology. And what the researchers and other writers are calling the more grandiose narcissist is analogous very much to the kind that I have long called in my books and other writings the character disturbed or character disordered narcissist. So there's compatibility there. And so the article on Friday on manipulative-people.com had to do with a grandiose narcissist whose world had kind of come tumbling down because even though he knew he was great from an early age and knew he could do no wrong, you see, that's another feature of narcissists. They are always right. And by the way, they don't mind telling you that. And you can, I mean, this is just it's a telltale sign. It's one of the, what we call cardinal signs. You know, you listen to these folks talk, and they're happy to tell you how right they were and how right they always are. And if you listen carefully in the speeches and the other news sound bites from these presidential candidates, you can pick out the folks who who do this on a regular basis. They don't just present evidence. They just insist they're right. And even in the face of contrary evidence, they could never acknowledge a mistake. It's always somebody else's fault. And back in the old days, we had some misconceptions also about why they do that kind of thing. Suffice it to say that, however, when a grandiose or character-disturbed narcissist comes face to face with the hard realities of life that are basically saying you're not as great as you think you are, when reality slaps them in the face and their grandiose world comes tumbling down, the last thing these folks want to do is take a serious look at who they are and say, boy, do I need a course correction? The world is trying to teach me a lesson here. I've failed big time. And that's probably because of the way I go about things. Probably because of the way I see things. Probably because of the way I treat people. So maybe I should take a look at myself. Maybe I should think about making some changes in the kind of person I am. Well, no, they don't do that. That's the very definition of character disturbance. And, in the more severe cases, character disorder. By definition, that's what it's all about. They can't do that. And so it has to be everybody else's fault. And the point of the article that I wrote on Friday, this past Friday, is that when that happens, when reality has slapped a narcissist in the face and demonstrated how great they're not, how not great they really are, in their efforts to blame everybody else and in their lack of ability to honestly self-reckon and course correct, they generally lash out in some ways that really do harm. And that's the way it was in the vignette that I depicted in my article last Friday. I can give you a little bit more detail about the story without revealing any confidentialities. All the stories, all the vignettes that I present in my books and other writings and even on the blogs, these vignettes are fictionalized to the extent that any identifying information is distorted on purpose. But the other thing is that because I have hundreds, literally hundreds, of similar examples, many times these stories are also blended. Borrowing a little fact from this one, a little fact from that one, just to alter the story a bit so that not one particular person or circumstance is being identified. But there are so many similar circumstances when somebody has a particular kind of character disorder that it's very easy to do that. So, but I can give you a little bit more information about how this case went down. For years, this person's wife, and in the article I call him Martin. For years, Martin's wife wanted him to get some help. She knew that there was something wrong with this guy. And, from her standpoint, he just never could see or never would see any aspect of himself that needed correction. It was his way or the highway. He was right. Everybody else was wrong. It was just that simple. And by the way, if you know anybody like that, want to share a story or two or ask a question, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. At any rate, she tried to get him some quote-unquote help many times and coerced him cajoled him into getting in a visit or two with a counselor. But as you would expect, right off the bat, old Martin would find something wrong with the counselor. So they went to Counselor A, and Counselor A said a few things that Martin didn't like, or showed a few qualities that Martin thought he couldn't deal with. And right away, he started complaining and insisting that they really needed to see somebody else. This would really upset his wife because she would think that maybe they were finally starting to get somewhere, and most especially she would think that maybe the therapist was actually getting kind of a little clue as to what Martin's character was all about. And so maybe the therapist was finally seeing what she had been dealing with through her entire relationship, and maybe she could get some good tips on how to deal with this. But no, it was always a problem, and not wanting to kill the whole prospect of getting help, she would acquiesce, and they would leave the first counselor and then look for another, shop for another, all the time putting up with the moaning and groaning about how none of these folks really know what they're talking about anyway. Some of them are crazier than the patients they treat, blah, 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 blah. And every excuse in the book not to go in, but with gentle pressure and cajoling and pushing, of course, he would finally go again, and then lo and behold, it wouldn't take very long before he was finding fault again. Because with narcissists, the fault can never lie with them. And we used to think some really weird things about why that's true. They have such a fragile, delicate self-image, such a tenuous sense of self, that to acknowledge a shortcoming would be decimating to their already damaged or weak sense of self-esteem. This is how we used to think. But nothing could be further from the truth in most cases. Not all cases, but in most cases. Because these days, as I point out in my books and other writings, these days, most narcissists are of the grandiose or character disturbed or disordered variety, and not of the more vulnerable, delicate, fragile, neurotic type that we used to think all narcissists were. So, why do they do it then? Why do they absolutely insist on holding on to this inflated self-image? Why can they not course correct, or why will they not course correct? Well, I have some interesting ideas about that. They came out of years of case study research. And I'm going to share a couple of those opinions with you now. There are two things that the special among us hate to do, the special and entitled. And this is a huge characteristic of the grandiose narcissist. These folks really do think not only that they're all that, but that they're God or nature's gift to the world. And therefore, they have an entitlement which the rest of us don't have. They have special status and therefore special privilege. And so there's two things that they will not do. They will not, in gratitude, obligate themselves. And because they feel so entitled to have whatever they want, they will not work. They will not really work, most especially on someone else's behalf. They will not accept the obligation to do for others. Because after all, they're special and they are due as they see it. The world owes them. So, one of the reasons why they resist so much these invitations from others to take a look at themselves and to course correct is not because their fragile little egos will go shattering in pieces and they'll just come apart and they'll just be a sad little wreck. That's not it at all. They disdain the work that it would take. They're above that. They don't want to do that. Why should they? Why should they? After all, they're nature or God's gift. They're special. And besides which, they're right. It's this screwy way of thinking about things, this really disturbed way of thinking about things, this stinking thinking that predisposes them to hone these attitudes and to resist what most of us, with some degree of conscientiousness, will do. So many times what has to happen, in the 12-step programs, especially AA, in the 12-step programs, they always talk about this concept of hitting bottom. Because individuals who are struggling with addictions, but who are still of a mind that they can control things, that they are still on top of the game, that they are still able to conduct their lives in the way they've always wanted to, and they don't really need anybody's help, and they can stop whenever they want. As the folks in AA are wont to say, they are in massive denial, and denial ain't just a river in Egypt. So what usually has to happen, the folks will tell you, is that there has to be this phenomenon that they call hitting bottom. There has to be a reality-driven confrontation of the folly of this grandiose image that they have, that they're really in control, they really have control when their life is falling apart. And they just have to be beaten. I don't mean physically beaten. I mean life has to hand them a total, utter, and this is the key word, undeniable defeat. They have to be broken. And only then, as the first step says, only when they are ready to admit that they have lost control, that they have lost power, that they are truly powerless, and that their lives have become completely unmanageable, a complete wreck. Only then, only in that hitting bottom, is there a prayer of rebuilding a life. And sometimes that's exactly what has to happen to the grandiose narcissist. They have to be in a place where they can no longer deny both the ridiculousness of their grandiose self-image, and where they also can't deny the mess that their unrealistic self-view has made of their lives. They have to come to a point where they're beaten, where this way of being can no longer be, where the jig is up, so to speak, and where they can no longer fool themselves or anybody else. Now, in the case that I was writing about in Friday's post, this is exactly what eventually happened. Martin had his mid-life, actually later midlife, conversion experience of sorts, because he'd made a mess of things enough times, got the same messages from enough people, alienated enough people in the exact same way as he had before, that he simply could not go on just blaming everybody else. And he had to start taking a look at himself. Now, this does happen. The real tragedy, folks, is how beaten down a person has to be amenable to some corrective guidance. That's the very nature of character disturbance. That's the very definition of a character disorder. Anybody that's been in a relationship with a character disordered person knows this. Maybe you have been. Maybe you have a story you want to share with us. If you do, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. There's another step that the 12-step folks use and talk about, and it comes after this hitting bottom, this reckoning with personal defeat and the unmanageability of life. And that is coming to believe in something bigger than you. And boy, let me tell you, you can say it all you want, but if you're a narcissist, I mean, you can flap those lips and talk about how you believe in a higher power, how you worship God, how you do this or that. In their heart of hearts, the character disordered narcissist, the grandiose narcissist, can't even conceive of a power greater than themselves. They can't even imagine it. That's how screwy they think, basically. That's how messed up their thinking is, how twisted their mentality is. They cannot even imagine anybody as great as them, let alone someone greater or something greater or something more powerful or something not only more powerful and greater, but something worth considering turning your life over to so that you could be guided to a new place in life. This is a very foreign concept to the grandiose narcissist, and they don't do this lightly. They have to be so beaten. They have to experience such failure of their way of doing things and their way of seeing things that they are broken, that they are completely stripped down and ready to be remade. And that does not happen easily, and it is not pretty, folks, when it does happen. And in an effort to forestall that, in an effort to avoid that kind of scenario, that's why many narcissists, when the world is crumbling down around them, and at some level they know it's their fault. They really do, at some level. They're not stupid, many times. It's not a matter of ignorance. It's a matter of character. And as the title of this program continues to say, character matters. It's what matters. But it's not a matter of ignorance. It's a matter of acceptance. They know at some level, but they're not prepared to admit. Why? As I mentioned before, it's not so much because their image is so fragile that it will just come tumbling down. That's not it. It's because of how much work it would be and on whose behalf they would be working to undertake the task. They would be working on behalf of society, on behalf of their loved ones, on behalf of their spouse, on behalf of their children. That's who they would be working for, and it would be a lot of work. Because, you know, when you're at midlife and you've been doing things a certain way, even though they're dysfunctional, but you've been doing them year after year, day in, day out, hour after hour, a certain way, thinking about things a certain way, looking at the world a certain way, it's hard to change. It's really hard to change. Not only that, if you decide to change and you seek help, getting the right kind of help is a real challenge. So this is a really challenging enterprise, a very challenging enterprise. And nobody does it without a heck of a lot of motivation. And so they need to be first broken to feel like there's basically no other choice. It's either, you know, this is putting it perhaps in the extreme, but there's a lot of truth to it. It's either change or die. It's got to get almost to that point. Change or die. Or at least change and continue, not change and continue to fail. So that's what they have to be faced with. And this is not a pretty sight as the end approaches. They will blame everything and everyone else, and they will vent their hostility on all the targets that they see. It's not a pretty picture. It's pretty nasty. And the fact that they're willing to direct that rage and that anger toward everyone else and make everybody else pay the price that rightfully belongs to them to pay. The fact that they were willing to do that bespeaks their grandiosity, bespeaks their sense of entitlement, bespeaks their lack of empathy for others. It's all about them, strictly about them. Oh, gosh. Unbelievable how folks these days succumb to this pattern. We live in the age of narcissism, which is why for at least another week I will be continuing on the topic, and I'll be wrapping it up at the end of next week. You can find all kinds of articles on the topic at my blog at manipulative-people.com. You can also find some articles on the counseling resource site at www.counselingresource.com. That's www.counselingwith2Ls resource.com. And then, of course, manipulative-people.com, www.manipulative-people.com. You can also find great material on the two types of narcissists and also the factors that contribute to that type of personality and character development and what you need to do to forestall that. If you've got kids and you don't want them to grow up to be this kind of individual, I urge you, character disturbance in particular, with its chapter on the 10 Commandments of Character Development that shows you exactly what they have to learn and how they have to learn it in order not to turn out with that grandiose mindset. So I urge you to avail yourself of character disturbance, the phenomenon of our age. Also, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People. and my book for the Christian faith community, The Judas Syndrome. And also my book soon to come out in April, How Did We End Up Here? It'll be speaking to you if you're at the end of your rope in a relationship and wondering how the heck it happened, how you're going to pick up the pieces and move on. Or maybe you're just one of those folks wondering how we kind of got here as a society, how this age of narcissism developed, how this age of massive character dysfunction snuck up on us and got the better of us and poisoned so many of our institutions and caused so many problems in our relationships, in our workplaces, in our communities, and caused us to suffer the loss of so much of our greatness. We are great as a country when we're good in character as a people. It's that simple. People of good character who have a sound internal moral compass, they build things. People of sound character are not just all about themselves. They're not narcissistic. They're not self-indulgent. They're not entitled. They have a broader view. They serve a higher power. They want to make things better. They want to innovate. They want to create. They want to build. Not just for themselves. Sure, they want to take care of themselves and they want to prosper. But doing that in a principled way, in a caring way, allows them to help others prosper at the same time, to bring others along for the ride. That's how it works. That's how great societies are built. That's how this country was built. And why it did enjoy periods of greatness. We have some periods of shame, no doubt. We have some periods that we should rightfully be very embarrassed about, that we should be ashamed for. But we have also had periods of incredible greatness. And we can do it again. It's all about the character. It's all about our individual character. And we are not going to build that great society. We are not, with people being so irresponsible that children have no guidance, that they're popped out like popcorn, and with no care or concern for their rearing, where people are so totally unprepared to do the job of raising children. We're not going to get there if we're lying to one another and cheating one another, trying to scam one another, always trying to get the better of one another. That's not how we're going to get there. We're not going to build that great society that way. In short, great societies are not born of narcissistic, entitled characters, and that's the age we live in. We live in the age of rampant, serious narcissism, self-indulgence, permissiveness, and most of all, the most evil, the most insidious aspect, entitlement. There's not a gratitude that begets the obligation necessary to pitch in and do your fair share to build. Yes, there are those among us who do that, and God bless you. That's why we have any civilization left, but there's not enough of us. We have to do our part to make this better. And that's what it's all about. That's why you hear this theme song play every single Sunday, and that's why I'm here. Because character does indeed matter. It matters to every aspect of our lives. And it's what makes us great and preserves our freedom. So if we want freedom to reign, we have to do our part, one heart at a time. I'll see you.